Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and welcome back to class in a slightly different format. Uh, this is how I will be giving my lectures. I'll be walking you through the Prezis like this, giving you the appropriate information, and you'll check Google Classroom for your assignments and such. So, without further ado, here we go. We're going to start a unit on protest art. Now, protest art is something that we don't really see until um, the ideas of the Enlightenment kind of transform the way governments treat people, and the ideas of the modern democracy and the modern republic and free speech and the inherent worth of every person and their potential. With the rise of those notions, what we're getting into is something that is a little bit more accessible to everyone, that everybody can make protest art. Everybody has a voice, and everybody can kind of project that voice into the broader community through different means. And what we'll see is that people will be doing this through things like posters, taking out ads, cartoons, illustrations, memes, videos, all of this stuff kind of play into redesigning the way that artists get out their message. This isn't, fine art or academic art. This is something a little bit more raw, and it's really cool to watch how these things become considered art as opposed to something that's a little bit rougher and something that wasn't done by somebody that is classically trained. So it really is not, always just protesting war or whatever their cause was, but it's also kind of challenging the ideas of what art is and who can make art and what makes art valuable. Not monetarily per se, but valuable to the society at large. So let's take a look at cartoons and illustrations. You didn't think that I would really do a presentation or a lecture without my trusty coffee, did you? Shame on you. All right. So, cartoons and illustrations, they really started from the tradition of etchings and lithography that we'll see with like Hogarth and Callot. But they really transformed into something different, that they became, these political and editorial cartoons that were in publications. They're in newspapers, they're in magazines, they're on posters, they're all around in different formats, trying to communicate with the greater audience, being the public. Um, The word cartoon actually comes from French carton, which means unfinished drawing. And you see that in this Daumier piece, that there is that element of unfinishedness. You see all the raw marks, you see the unfinished architecture, that this is not something that is done and planned for something else, which the original cartoons would have been, but instead it's left in that raw state. So here we see the Council of War, and Daumier is making a statement on the French government. Okay, they had just gotten out of the Franco-Prussian War, and he's really not pleased with the way that the French government is handling the um, the approach of the way that they're governing, I guess. So here we're seeing, these skeletal images, man, woman, child decapitated, walking into the Council of War to state their case, for for better government. So let's take a look into the beginnings here. Let's take a look at this calotte piece. First, I'm going to try and get this here. All right, we'll read the caption. Those whom Mars supports, Mars being the god of war, with his evil deeds, serve in this manner the poor country people. They take them prisoner, burn their villages, and even wreak havoc on their livestock. Neither fear nor commandments, 10 commandments, nor sense of duty, nor tears and cries can move them. So Calotte did this series of 18 etchings. This is in response to the 30 Years' War. And what we see is really the horrors of war. Okay, we see troops moving in. We see uh, burning houses, things like that. Now, it's thought that Calotte made these not as a war protest, but really to kind of show and illustrate during this series the horrors of war. Okay, and the destruction and the death that comes with it. We talked a lot about this in the last unit, but this is kind of showing how we transform from here to something more in a traditional sense of the editorial cartoon. Now, this is a piece by Hogarth, famous etcher, famous printmaker, and here he is being shown, or not being shown, but showing his support for George III in the 7 Years' War. And everything that we have in here is really symbolic of what was going on at the time. So here we have William Pitt the Elder, Prime Minister, fanning the flames of war while the Union office is trying to extinguish these flames. You see refugees down here trying to rebuild their lives and capture some decency. Here in the center, you see a mad fiddler, kind of in the in the mark of Nero from old ancient Rome. But this represents the King of Prussia, who really didn't play, who really was kind of on the sidelines and kind of adding confusion to the fray. We have France and Spain up here trying to extinguish the the not the flames, but the person actually trying to extinguish the flames. So they're adding more chaos. They're the rival in this group. They're the people who are against England in the 7 Years' War. So they're trying to prevent um, George III and his dukes from actually putting an end to this war. This is a super detailed illustration. There's actually another panel that I'm not going to get into. I've left a link to some information if you want to research this a little bit more. It's actually quite an interesting piece. It gets into, the Broken Castle Inn and the Temple Coffee House and the symbolism behind everything here. But I'm not going to get into that too much on here because I want to move on to probably the most famous uh, early political cartoon that we see, um, The Plum Pudding in Danger. Now, this is illustrating uh, William Pitt the Younger, who was also prime minister, and Napoleon carving up their spheres of influence and carving up the world however they see fit. Now, Gilray was the most famous cartoonist of his time. This is at a moment in time where political cartoons are really ramping up. They're gaining popularity, they're gaining a wider audience. You see, like in the late 1700s, in the early 1800s, this is when they really spread out to all sorts of different publications and spread out of the epicenters of what was of political and editorial cartooning, which were England and France. So here we're seeing it kind of spread out into the wider audience globally.